Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on the American Carbon Registry and California Early Action Offset Projects. I'm Belinda Morris. I am I'm ACR's California Director, and I'm based in Sacramento. As many of you know, the American Carbon Registry is an approved offset project registry for the California Cap and Trade Program, as well as an approved Early Action Offset Program. We're honored to have the opportunity to support California's Cap and Trade Program. We're holding this webinar to give you more information on ARB's Early Action Offset Program and also to inform you about the process for listing Early Action Offset projects on ACR's registry, and finally to answer any questions that you may have. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly just go over the agenda for today and give some webinar logistics. There'll be 4 people speaking on this webinar. I'll start by giving a brief introduction to ACR, our role as an Early Action Offset Program in California's Cap and Trade Program, and also some key terminology definitions. We're very pleased to have Greg Mayer, the manager of California Air Resources Board's Offset Program implementation, speak about ARB's Early Action program for offsets. Greg will give a comprehensive overview of the program, and if he doesn't answer all your questions in his presentation, he'll be available for questions during the last half hour of the webinar. Apologies. Following Greg, Nick Martin, who is ACR's Chief Technical Officer, will speak about ACR's qualifications as an early action offset program and what we offer in terms of services and pricing. And lastly, Laura Nichols, who's ACR's technical manager, will speak about the process for listing an early action offset project with ACR and taking that project to issuance of early action offset credits, including the steps, the forms, and the timelines that we offer. We've allocated 90 minutes for the full webinar. We expect the presentation part of the webinar to take about 50 minutes, leaving approximately 30 to 40 minutes for questions and answers. Depending on the number of questions asked, we may take the full 90 minutes or we may wrap up a little bit early. So just some logistics to be aware of during the webinar. All questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, at the end of the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation or at the Q&A session at the end, or if you would like to ask your question in person, you may click the hand symbol. I believe it's in the top left corner of the pane, and I'll call on you. If sending a written question, please type your questions into the chat box near the bottom of your webinar pane and include your name and organization. In some cases, we may immediately respond to your question in writing, but in most cases, I'll direct your question to the appropriate speaker during the Q&A period, and that speaker will give a verbal response so that everybody can hear. We will try to answer all questions during the webinar. However, if time does not enable us to get to them all, we'll make our best effort to respond to any questions not addressed via email following the webinar. Please note that the webinar will be recorded. Both the presentation and a link to the recording will be sent to all registered webinar participants a day or maybe a couple of days after the webinar. Maybe given the holiday this week, it'll be towards the end of the week. So I'd like to give you a brief introduction to ACR and ACR's role as an early action offset program before handing over to our guest speaker, Greg Mayer. So for those of you who don't know us, the American Carbon Registry is an enterprise of Winrock International. Winrock is a non-profit organization based in the US with operations in over 60 countries all around the world. Winrock has a strong focus on seeking ways to connect with new markets and promote market innovation. We also have a very strong science background. ACR is a leading voluntary registry with strong standards for environmental integrity and transparency. The registry was originally founded in 1996 as the Greenhouse Gas Registry, and we were the first private voluntary greenhouse gas registry established in the United States. In 2007, Winrock International acquired the registry, and soon thereafter we became known as the American Carbon Registry. So the main role of the registry is to develop and approve greenhouse gas accounting methodologies for the voluntary carbon market, to review and register carbon projects, oversee independent verification, track carbon offset transactions and retirements in the registry. And lastly, but most importantly to our conversation today, to support California's cap and trade market as an offset project registry and an early action offset program. To date, we've issued over 37 million offsets in the voluntary market. In May of 2012, we opened an office in Sacramento to support California's cap and trade program. We were approved by the Air Resources Board as an offset project registry and an early action offset project program in December of 2012. In this capacity, we list the projects that use the California compliance offset protocols. We ensure proper reporting and verification of those projects and issue registry offset credits that can then be issued as ARB offset credits for use in the compliance market. We also list early action offset projects, oversee the reporting and verification process of those projects, and issue early action offset credits that may be taken to ARB to be issued again as ARB offset credits. Before I hand over to Greg, I'd just like to clarify some key terms used in the early action offset program. So firstly, an early action offset program is a program, usually a registry, that meets the requirements of section 95990A of the cap and trade regulation and has been approved by ARB. ACR was approved as an early action offset program in December of 2012. An early action offset program can review and list projects using ARB's early action quantification methodologies. We oversee reporting and verification and issue early action offset credits for those projects. So an early action offset project is an offset project that is registered with an early action offset program using an approved early action offset quantification methodology and ultimately is issued early action offset credits. And an early action offset credit is a tradable credit that is used by an early action offset program using ARB approved early action quantification methodologies that represent a greenhouse gas reduction or greenhouse gas removal enhancement equivalent to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent and meets the requirements of section 95990C of California's cap and trade regulation. Because ACR is an approved early action offset program, we can issue early action offset credits. And lastly, an ARB offset credit is a tradable compliance instrument used by ARB that represents a greenhouse gas reduction or greenhouse gas removal enhancement of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. An ARB offset credit is only issued after the related registry offset credit or early action offset credit is cancelled on the relevant offset project registry or early action offset program. So to date, ARB has approved 4 early action quantification methodologies which are eligible for early action offset credits. These include the Climate Action Reserve's Livestock Protocol, versions 1.0 to 3.0, as well as their Urban Forests Protocol, versions 1.0 to 1.1, their US ODS Protocol, version 1.0, and their Forests Protocol, version 2.1 and 3.0 to 3.2. Early action offset projects must complete normal listing, verification, and credit issuance with an ARB-approved early action offset program for one of these quantification methodologies. They can then register with ARB and complete a desk verification in order for offset credits to be eligible in the compliance program. For issuance of early action offset credits on ACR, either vintages of current early action projects not yet issued or new early action offset projects can register with ACR. So now I'd like to turn over to Greg Mayer, who we're very pleased was able to join us today, and he will present an overview of ARB's early action offset program. Greg.
Greg, are you on mute?
Oh, Greg, we're unable to hear you right now.
Sorry, when I tried to switch over to the handset, it hung up on me. I apologize. not starting off well here. All right, so you guys ready for me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please start, Greg.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to begin with a brief overview of our program. Belinda did a very good job summarizing it, so I can sort of skim over a couple of these slides, and we can leave more time for questions at the end. All right, here we go. The intent of the Early Action Program is to recognize voluntary early actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon that happened prior to the adoption of our program. The early action credits must be issued by an approved early action offset program, and these credits will be eligible for use in the cap-and-trade program. So far, we have identified 4 protocol types that we will accept for early action, and in the future we may add more depending on the protocols that we adopt for compliance. Okay. So as Belinda stated, you must first list with an early action offset program. We have 2 of those approved, the American Carbon Registry and the Climate Action Reserve. Then you monitor, report, and verify according to the approved early action quantification methodologies adopted in the regulation. That will also include things that are adopted by reference. That would include the verification and some of the program manuals that are referenced in the protocols. But you will use a verification body or verifier approved by the Early Action Offset Program. It does not have to be one approved by ARB. The Early Action Offset Program must issue the early offset credits, and then you can request issuance of ARB offset credits after they are converted to ARB offset credits. They are eligible for compliance. Projects may list with any approved early action offset program, and projects may transition between the approved early action offset programs. Credits may not transition between the early action offset programs. All early action offset programs are able to issue early action offset credits using any of the approved early action quantification methodologies, and all early action offset programs are bound by the same requirements as far as eligibility, crediting, issuing guidance, etc. All early action offset programs have the ability to issue the same guidance and clarifications on the early action quantification methodologies. Because of the Administrative Procedures Act in California and our regulatory requirements, there are some restrictions on the guidance that is currently out there on early action offset quantification methodologies. Guidance that was issued prior to October 20th, 2011 is approved for uses because that was the adoption date of the regulation. However, guidance issued after that date will have to be evaluated by ARB. And the criteria that will be used to determine if that guidance will be approved is as follows. Guidance that contradicts the clear language of the quantification methodology will not be allowed. However, guidance that is consistent with the intent of the quantification methodology and reasonable will be allowed. ARB will communicate the guidance eligibility both prior to October 20 and after October 20 to all early action offset programs quickly, and will release FAQs as soon as possible on our website. So issuance of ARB offset credits for early action. In order for early action offset credits to be eligible for compliance use, the early action credits must meet the requirements of the regulation and undergo a regulatory verification. Once ARB determines all requirements are met, it will issue ARB offset credits after the early action offset credits have been retired by the early action offset program. So what are the criteria? The reductions must have occurred between January 1, 2005 and December 31st, 2014. They must result from an early action offset project listed by January 1, 2014. We are aware this will create an issue for any new protocols that we adopt in this coming year and are taking steps to resolve that. They must result from an early action project located in the United States. They must be issued credits by an approved early action offset program, and then they must undergo the regulatory verification required by ARB. So as Belinda noted, these are the 4 protocols that were accepted as early action quantification methodologies and the various versions that are eligible under those quantification methodologies. Any early action offset program may issue early action offset credits using any of the approved quantification methodologies. Okay, who may seek issuance of ARB offset credits? In the case of forest and urban forest projects that do not transition to a compliance offset protocol, only the project operator or authorized project designee may seek issuance of the ARB offset credits. For projects that do transition and livestock and ODS, the OPO or APD or holder of the credits may request issuance of ARB offset credits. The holder may only request transition of credits if the OPO or APD does not request transition, and the holder must notify the OPO or APD of their intent to transition and give the holder or give the OPO or APD a reasonable amount of time for them to list. So the requirements to transition the credits: you must register with ARB. This is our compliance instrument tracking system. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. Then you must list with the early action offset project with ARB. Have the project successfully complete a regulatory verification, which includes a desk review. If the desk review is not successful, the project may decide to conduct a full verification to transition those credits to ARB. And then they must request issuance. All right, registering with our Compliance Instrument Tracking System service, we have guidance available on our offsets webpage. You can see the link below, and once you get the copy of the slides, you'll be able to click it directly through. It's pretty straightforward. If there's any complications, feel free to contact Trish Johnson. She's the staff lead of the Compliance Instrument Tracking System Service registration. I have both her email and her phone number here, and she's really good about helping you resolve any issues that you have. Okay, listing with ARB, you must submit the information required in sections 95990E2. The form is available both on the ARB websites and the Early Action Offset Program websites. You can click the link here to get to the form on our website. ARB will make the listing publicly available on its web page. The web page is updated on the first Wednesday of every month at noon, and you can see the projects that are currently listed by clicking the link here. So the regulatory verification. All projects must be verified by an ARB accredited verification body. You can find a list of those on our ARB offsets page. The regulatory verification body must be different than any of the verification bodies that performed the original verification on the Early Action Offset Programs project. The desk review would include a review of all the original documentation submitted to the Early Action Offset Program, including the Early Action Verification Reports and Offset Verification Statements. It will also include a review of the data checks conducted during the original verification to ensure they were calculated correctly. When audited or requested, the desk review verification body must provide documentation on how the decision was reached. If the ARB verifier concludes with reasonable assurance after its review of the original documentation that a positive verification statement should have been issued, the verifier must make attestations to ARB regarding their findings. If the desk review does not, if it does not pass the desk review, then the verifier must prepare a report for ARB explaining the reasons. ARB will review the information, and if ARB agrees with the conclusions, full offset verification services may be conducted to transition the credits. The full offset verification services are conducted. They follow the standard requirements for a full offset verification under the compliance offset program. However, they would use the standards of the early action program. If the early action project is still in operation, a site visit must be conducted. The verifier must ensure the sampling plan covers all early action credits issued under the early action verification report, and the verifier must ensure the data checks include checks across all sources identified in the sampling plan. The verification body must submit an offset verification statement to ARB and prepare a verification report as required under the compliance program verification requirements. So ARB offset credits will be issued if the requirements of Section 9599OH are met, including a wet signature on the attestations in this section. So that means you'll be able to submit it electronically, and we can start processing the request for issuance, but credits cannot be issued until we have a hard copy with a wet signature, FedEx, or mail to ARB. ARB offset credits will not be issued for early action offset credits that have been retired, canceled, or used to meet a surrender obligation, a voluntary commitment, or any GHG mitigation requirements in any voluntary or regulatory system. ARB will determine how many ARB offset credits will be issued for each early action verification report based on three main factors: the number of ARB offset credits that meet the requirements of the regulation and that the OPO or APD or holder is seeking issuance of, the number of qualifying early action offset credits transferred from the early action offset program, program's buffer pool, and the project-specific risk rating in ARB's compliance offset protocol for U.S. forest projects. This is to deal with any possible discrepancies between calculating the required contribution to the forest buffer account on some of the earlier versions of the quantification methodologies for forestry. Once ARB has determined to issue offset credits, it will notify the early action offset program and the OPO, APD, and holder as appropriate. The early action offset program must remove the original early action credits within 10 calendar days of notification. Credits will then be transferred into the holding account of the OPO, APD, or holder. Others will have to work with the OPO or APD to obtain the credits. This is because of the requirements in the regulation that if the OPO or APD transitions the project, credits can only be placed into the OPO or APD's holding account. Any holders of credits will need to work with the OPO or APD to get those credits transitioned into their compliance account at ARB. If they do not have a compliance account at ARB, it will not be possible to transition these early action offset credits into their account, or ARB offset credits into their account. So transition of early action projects to compliance. Any project that wants to transition to the compliance protocol must do so by February 18, 2015. GHG reductions or removal enhancements achieved under the early action early action quantification methodologies must be verified by September 30, 2015 to be issued ARB offset credits. This applies to both projects that transition and those that remain under the voluntary protocols that are subject to that same date. When an offset project transitions, it must list the offset project with an offset project registry. Again, we have two approved, ACR and CAR both approved. Thereafter, the offset project must meet the requirements in sub-article 13 for monitoring, reporting, and verification. Once an offset project transitions to a compliance offset protocol, it must begin a new crediting period. Invalidation. In general, invalidation provisions for ARB offset credits that originated as early action credits are the same as ARB offset credits. The desk review will count as the first regulatory verification. The statute of limitations is 8 years unless the requirements are met for shortening the time frame. For ODS, the same offset project data report must be re-verified by a different verification body within 3 years. For all other project types, a subsequent offset project data report must be verified by a different verification body within 3 years. Oops. Sorry. There we go. That will satisfy the requirement of the second regulatory verification before the time frame is shortened to 3 years. The invalidation time frame begins with the date that ARB offset credits are issued. So for early action, if you're talking about a vintage year 2005, the 3-year time frame would not begin until the credits are issued on ARB. So if they're issued in 2013, that would give you 3 years to conduct that second regulatory verification, so until 2016. Thank you. That is all I have for my presentation, so I'll pass it back to Belinda.
Thanks very much, Greg. That was a very comprehensive overview of the Early Action Offset Program. I'm sure that everyone still has a lot of questions despite all the detail that Greg gave us. So I just want to remind you that we will be doing a Q&A session at the end. And if you'd like to submit your questions in writing, you can do so at any time. Or if you'd like to ask in person, just press the raise the little hand icon and I'll call on you during the Q&A session. So I just want to pass over now to Nick Martin, ACR's Chief Technical Officer, and he's going to give you some of the details on ACR's qualifications as an early action offset program and also what we offer in terms of our expertise, our services, and pricing. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks a lot, Belinda, and thanks to everyone for participating today. I'll give you a little advance warning. This will probably be the most sort of sales pitchy part of the webinar, but we thought it was really worthwhile since folks are, it's somewhat of a newer thing to list early action projects on ACR. We should really sort of address some of the reasons to consider doing so. So I'm going to take just a few slides to do that. Sorry. Okay, so this is just quickly. These are I'm going to have one slide each, I think, on each of these things. So the reasons that I think people might consider listing a project on for LFT carbon protocols that can translate into quick and accurate answers when answers are needed on a protocol requirement, and ultimately into a low risk of the early action offset credit not being able to convert into an ARB offset credit or subsequently being invalidated. That's that type of risk is something that project developers are justifiably very interested in minimizing. Second, an in-depth understanding of the early action and compliance protocols. Third, a long track record as a voluntary registry initially. Since before 2000 of sort of very detailed project review and credit issuance. Fourth, a customer service orientation and responsiveness that we've really tried to make one of our key offerings, which I think ultimately translates into a quicker path to issuance of early action offset credits that can be converted ultimately into ARB offset credits. Fifth, a competitive fee structure, including no issuance fees, and I'll put that up shortly. And finally, an open channel of communication with ARB to address questions and provide consistent interpretations. We have both early action offset programs, I should say, have weekly calls with ARB to address questions, and then more frequent communications in between as well. So first, technical expertise. As Belinda mentioned, ACR is the first greenhouse gas registry in the United States, founded a little over 17 years ago. And we have, since that time, experience in protocol development, review of projects, so projects that come to us, similar to what's happening now under early action. Project plans come to us, and we have always done a detailed review of those plans as well as the verification reports. And then also experience, I think ACR was really the first registry that set up a system for fully transparent credit issuance and serialized tracking, which is very important for the overall transparency of the market, to be able to see all the credits issued, retired, and transacted. Second, expertise in protocol development, which we do both in-house protocols that we write ourselves and with partners that write protocols and put them through ACR's review process. I've listed on the slide some of the protocols that ACR has developed over the years and are still in development. I won't talk about any of these, only to note that many of those areas are overlap with the currently approved project types for early action and compliance, and they go beyond it as well. So we're in terms of reviewing protocols that come to us and interpreting protocols, that's something that we have a lot of years of experience in. The ACR team has been accredited in all 4 ARB compliance protocols and is assisting in the effort to develop the two newest ones, rice and coal mine methane. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that besides the ACR team itself, we have the really useful and unique benefit of being able to draw on a larger team, a sort of larger bench strength in forest, carbon, clean energy, and agricultural experts around the world. Winrock has a team called Ecosystem Services that has written forest carbon protocols for a broad range of clients, for ACR, for other registries as well, and for the government. So they're a real useful resource for us if we need additional input on a question. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our project review process. For voluntary projects, and to be clear, this is a totally separate stream of projects. It's projects developed under ACR's voluntary greenhouse gas offset methodologies. When projects are using those methodologies and submit a greenhouse gas project plan, or what's often referred to as a PDD, project design document, all of those are first reviewed and certified by ACR. We rarely accept a greenhouse gas project plan the first time it's submitted. There's almost always 1 or 2 rounds of back and forth with the project developer. So the first review step is by ACR. Now, of course, there is also the third-party validation and verification. So you've got a third party that's accredited in that project scope and that's fully independent of ACR doing another review of any PDD. But we think it's important to have it looked at in-house as well, and we think that process often really identifies issues up front and streamlines and makes shorter the separate third-party validation and verification that's done for voluntary projects. It doesn't reduce the scope of that validation and verification, but it's a first look at the project by ACR. And then, of course, we do a review of any validation and verification reports prior to issuing ERTs, which are ACR's voluntary credit, the name of that type of credit. So similarly for early action projects, the process and the sort of rigor of the review or level of review is similar. The steps are slightly different, though. Early action projects will submit an early action listing form for ACR review. We will be reviewing that listing form, having a back and forth with the project developer to address any issues that are not compliant with the early action quantification methodology. Second step, there's a project-specific conflict of interest evaluation by the verification body. By the way, Lauren will be in the final presentation of this session going through each of these steps in terms of the mechanics of them. Third step, the early action project developer will be submitting an early action. Here we say OPDR, Offset Project Data Report. That's actually the terminology that's more specific to the compliance offset protocols. But at any rate, it's a reporting form for the greenhouse gas reductions and removal enhancements achieved for a specific reporting period, January 1st to June 30th, 2013, for example. It's specific to a reporting period. Fourth, there's a third-party verification by ACR accredited verification bodies. ACR requires independent accreditation of all our verification bodies by the American National Standards Institute, and those are some of those verifiers, of course, may be also accredited by ARB. But in talking about this verification step, it's the verification under the Early Action Offset Program, and so those are ACR accredited. I should say ACR approved, independently accredited verification bodies. Fifth, a review by ACR of the verification report, and ultimately, usually some back and forth with the verifier, leading to acceptance of the verification statement. Then issuance of early action offset credits. So to be clear, those are not ARB offset credits, as Greg made clear. That those are credits issued by the Early Action Offset Program. And then there's a separate process under 95990E2 in which the OPO, APD, or credit holder will submit information to ARB to convert early action offset credits for a specific reporting period into ARB offset credits. Next, I want to talk about customer service. This is something we've really made a key priority in our voluntary business and also now in our early action and California compliance part of our operation. So ACR really prides itself on responsiveness to clients, being able to answer technical questions on the protocols based on our expertise and knowledge of the regulation, certainly in consultation with ARB. Some issues may be addressed in the protocol, and those are issues that ACR can answer immediately, but as Greg made clear, some issues of interpretations for which there hasn't been existing interpretations already released, those are things that we would consult with ARB and be able to provide feedback. And we try to do that really, on a couple of days turnaround basis if we can. Of course, some issues take longer to resolve, but we've really prided ourselves on a quick turnaround. I mentioned already that the early action offset programs have regular weekly calls with ARB to address questions that have come in from project developers, questions of interpretation of the protocols. And so the idea there is to have a regular mechanism to get guidance from ARB where that's needed, make sure that both early action offset programs have the same understanding and can consistently communicate the answer back to the project developers. Secondly, I just want to mention that another thing that ACR has really tried to do so far is identifying key technical or process questions of concern and trying to take initiative to resolve them preemptively. So where we're hearing from a lot of project developers that there's an issue of uncertainty or an issue causing uncertainty in project registration, we've tried to work with ARB and sometimes with the Climate Action Reserve to address that issue. An example is tree heights. I'll talk about that in a minute. And another recent example, point of origin documentation requirements for certain types, smaller quantities of ozone depleting substances, and questions surrounding the requirements for registration of projects on tribal lands. Those are all areas where ACR has worked to actually bring stakeholders together, project developers who have a concern about something in the protocol being unclear or ARB's interpretation differing from interpretations they've been familiar with. We've brought those stakeholders together, understood their concerns, sort of developed formulated a question reflecting the concerns of the project developers, and brought that to ARB for clarification, or in other ways sort of tried to be a conduit to ARB to communicate those concerns and then get in those cases, an ARB resolution of the particular issue. There are in the regulation specified maximum timeframes for many of the steps of the early action listing, reporting, verification, and issuance process. And Those, of course, are our maximum, but ACR strives to turn each of those steps around significantly quicker than the maximum time frame allowed in the regulation. Just a bit about our pricing. This is available on ACR's website. You can look under membership and see our fee schedule. There's relatively small fees for opening and then annually renewing an account with ACR. And the project listing, whether it's an early action project listing or a compliance project listing, the review that we do is a one-time $750 per listing fee. And I guess to be clear, I should say it's not necessarily per project. It's actually per reporting period that gets listed. If it has to have a separate listing form, it would have a separate listing review. In terms of our fees, there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight here. One is that we've tried to keep our fees competitive to minimize the cost that aspect of the cost to projects. Our fees are currently the lowest in the market by about 7 cents relative to other early action offset program published fees. So the way this works, I'll talk about it briefly, and I think Lauren will as well. There is no fee for issuance of credits, compliance credits or early action offset credits. So you can go through the process of listing, reporting, verifying, and even being issued credits without paying any fees, except for the $750 fee listed above for the project review, project listing review. So you can, and your credits will be fully verified, and then those credits, once sitting in your ACR account, at the time that you're ready to either sell them to another ACR, to a buyer who also has an account on ACR, or you're ready to cancel those credits because you've requested ARB offset credits and ARB has asked us to cancel the credits. At that time, the project developer pays a 15-cent fee to activate the credits, and then a 3-cent fee to cancel them, or else 2-cent fee to transact them. So a total fee of 17 to 18 cents. And it's really, I think, important to highlight too that because those fees are delayed, no fees are charged on issuance. That can be an important cash flow advantage to consider. There could be many months between issuance and actually being ready to either cancel or transact the credits. So it can be advantageous to projects not to have to pay anything until they're ready to do that, and then they have fully verified credits that can be sort of instantaneously activated and canceled, or activated and transacted. In the last couple of slides, I just want to highlight key differences between the early action and compliance protocols. The first slide on that is actually quite general, and Greg talked about this, but it's important because there's been confusion, I think, some confusion in the market about this, so I think it bears repeating. The project developers will want to be really careful when thinking about protocol interpretations that have been given by an early action offset program in the past, as well as variances, to understand that interpretations that were given before the October, I think it's actually October 20th rather than 21st, sorry about that, 2011, date of adoption of the ARB, by the ARB of the protocols, those interpretations are honored and will be the same. They'll be consistent between both early action offset programs. Variances given before that time will be honored in the sense that a project that has that variance can continue to apply, that variance stands for when that project wants to convert to ARB offset credits, but they're not precedent setting for other projects. But any interpretation that is in a sense a new interpretation after October 20th of 2011 has to be reviewed by ARB for reasonableness and consistency. So if you're working with an interpretation that you're assuming is valid, it's really important to understand when that interpretation happened, and if it's after October 2011, you should bring that, to the attention of ARB or through one of the early action offset programs, so that we can bring that to ARB's attention and make sure that they have also agreed with the interpretation. On this slide, there's some specific examples of some differences between the early action and compliance protocols. I think because I'm looking and realizing we're a little bit over time for where we want it to be, and Lauren has still to give her sort of nuts and bolts slides that I think will be important to people. I want to skip this slide, and folks can certainly talk with us about these differences. So I think at this point I will hand the microphone over to Lauren to just sort of go through with people the ACR process, the nuts and bolts forms and timelines for listing an early action offset project. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Nick. So I'm going to take the next few minutes, the last part of our presentation, to talk about the process of an early action project from listing through issuance on ACR. And Nick covered these steps earlier, but I'm going to just list them off again here, and then go over each of them in a little bit more detail in the following slides. So first is opening an ACR account if it's not already established. Second is submitting the listing information for review and approval by ACR. Third is the verification body will then submit their project-specific conflict of interest form. Fourth, the project proponent will submit the early action offset project data report for the verification. Fifth is the verification by the approved verification body themselves. And sixth is the ACR review of the final project documents once they're submitted for our review. And seventh is issuance of early action offset credits, followed by the conversion of the early action offset credits to RBOX through the process that we've already been covered. So going back to the first step, opening the ACR account can be initiated through the link on this slide. That brings you to the membership page on our website, where you can click on the Open Account button. This page also includes information, other information about ACR membership and documents that you can download for reference. So once you click on the Open a New Account button, that brings you to the ACR terms and conditions, which you can review and actually download by clicking on the link at the top of the page there. After clicking to agree the terms of conditions, you then able to enter your account information and submit any requested information to the ACR administrator, and the full application will be sent to us for review and approval. Okay, so step 2 of submitting the new early action project. Once the account is set up on ACR, the account holder can log in and create a new project entry in the system from their account dashboard screen. Then, as mentioned earlier, they complete and upload the project-specific early action listing form. So there will be a unique listing form for each of the project types, the approved early action project types. For forest carbon projects, ACR does not require a project implementation agreement, or PIA, but we do require the project proponent, which may or may not be the landowner, to sign and agree to the ACR Forest Carbon Risk Mitigation Agreement, which is agreeing to use an ACR-approved risk mitigation mechanism in the case of reversal. So if in reading the early action protocols, you will see references to PIAs, but ARB has confirmed that any of these references to PIAs in the early action protocol should instead be read as the ACR buffer pool terms and conditions when bringing the project through the ACR system, the early action project through the ACR system. So just for forest carbon projects only, that agreement is submitted at the same time as the early action listing form. So then the project proponent submits the full listing package to ACR for review and approval. This is the time, once it's submitted, this is the time that the project will be assigned its unique ID. And typically the ACR review of the listing information for early action projects will be around 5 business days. However, as Nick mentioned, there may be some requests for clarification or edits to the information that was submitted. So the approval of the listing will depend on whether or not that is required and the response time to address any questions or clarifications we have. Please note that once the listing form is approved and the listing of the project is approved, the form, early action listing form, will become a publicly accessible document on the registry system. So the next step is the selection of the verification body and the approval of the verification body. The account holder will go into their account and select the one of the ACR approved verification bodies to conduct the verification services for the early action project. As Nick mentioned before, all verification bodies for early action projects must be ACR approved. And the accreditation by any accreditation by ARB does not take the place of our standard ACR verification body application and review process. Details on the process and how to initiate that if a project would like to use a verification body that is not already approved can be found on our website, and you can contact me, and I'd be happy to walk you through the steps of that. So once the verification body is selected, the verification body will then be able to log into the registry system through their own account and access the project they've been selected for and complete and upload the project-specific conflict of interest form, which is ACR's own form to inquire about the conflict of interest and the relationship of the selected verification body and the account holder and project developer. So ACR, once it's uploaded, ACR will review the submitted form and typically provide a determination or a request for more information within about 3 business days. So the next step is to complete and upload the early action offset project data report and the submission of the emission reduction data for verification. What we're calling the early action offset project data report will contain the final assessment by the project proponent of the emission reductions and removals to be verified. And again, there will be a unique form for each project type, so they would select the one that's applicable in their case. At this time, the project proponent must also submit the ACR project attestation, which covers regulatory compliance, voluntary implementation, and offset title, which are the 3 topics that the 3 topics of the individual attestations which are referenced in the early action offset protocols. ACR has confirmed with ARB that this own ACR attestation can be used for projects using the early action protocols as long as they cover the same topics as referenced in the protocols, which they do. The attestation also covers another topic, environmental and community impacts, and asks that the proponent attests that at no time during or since the project development have there been any undisclosed or unmitigated adverse environmental or community impacts as a result of the project. So those are the 4 topics that the attestation covers, and it's a single document which must be uploaded prior to submitting the document for verification. A new attestation is required for each reporting period being verified. So once those forms are uploaded, then the account holder submits the project to the verifier for verification. So step 5 of verification, the selected verification body will get a notice that the project is ready for verification, and they can again go log in to their account and access all of the data that are the offset project data report, all the forms that have been uploaded there. Unlike compliance offset projects, there is no required notice of offset verification services form in the case of early action projects on ACR. However, we will be communicating with the verification body and the account holder regarding dates for planned site visits and things like that. So once the verification process is complete, the verifier will upload their verification report and statement. They will then put the ball back in the court of the account holder to either approve the documents for submittal, or the account holder can review, and if they determine there need to be, they want some edits made to the final reports, they can ask the verifier to make those edits as well and re-upload them. Similarly, before submittal for ACR review, the verifier can also request that the account holder and the project developer resubmit any emissions data if they have found an error. So then it is the project proponent who actually submits the final documents to ACR for review and consideration of issuance. Okay. Oops, I'm sorry. I think I got ahead of myself. Okay, so ACR will then conduct the detailed review of the final project submittal, and generally we will provide a determination on the issuance within 10 business days. And if revisions are required, the actual time to issuance, of course, will depend on the response time of addressing any issues or questions or clarifications that the ACR team has on those final documents. So ACR can, at that point, then request, if needed, a resubmittal of the verification documents. Okay, step 7 is the issuance of the early action offset credits. When ACR determines that the project is eligible for issuance, we will, of course, issue those corresponding credits to their account. And as Nick mentioned earlier in describing the fee structure, all the credits that are issued as inactive and must be activated prior to transfer or cancellation for conversion to RBOX. And as you mentioned, there is no fee for issuance, which is can be beneficial, allowing the project proponents to defer the payment of any per ton fees until they're ready to transact or cancel. So prior to the conversion to RBOX, the account holder will go in and select the tons that they want to activate, and if they so choose at the time, they can activate and simultaneously request a cancellation for conversion to RBOX. This is a convenient step because it's just going in once, and it will generate only one invoice for the two associated fees, the 15-cent activation fee, and then if canceling, the 3-cent per ton cancellation fee. And of course, you know, the request for cancellation is just that. It does not determine when the cancellation will go into effect. ARB at the notice of, or excuse me, ACR at the notice of ARB will be the one to actually make the cancellation of final, and that will not occur until all of the steps that Greg has mentioned have been completed and the whole process has been approved. Okay, so finally we have the conversion of early action offset credits to RBUCs. And as Greg has already covered, many of the steps that must be taken with ARB directly in order to initiate the conversion of early action credits to RBUCs. So just very quickly, the OPRAPV provides all the required information to ARB, and if any information is requested from ACR ourselves, we will also require any requested information at that time. Once the ARB determines that the emission reductions and removal enhancements meet the requirements of the regulation and all information submitted is complete, it will notify the early action offset program, and within 10 days of its determination to issue the RBUC. So we will get a notification from ARB once they've made their determination that they are eligible. And we are required to cancel those early action and offset credits from the system within 10 days of being notified. So as I mentioned earlier, if the request from the project proponent has come in already, we already have that request. That cancellation can be done pretty much immediately once we get the green light from ARB. So then once we have canceled the corresponding tons on the ACR, ARB issues the RBUCs and transfers them into the holding account or account on the KIT system. And finally, this is just a quick summary of the forms and documents that are required for early action projects on ACR that I've mentioned in the description. So I won't go through any of them again, but just to let you know that these can all be found on our website. And if you have any questions or want to know more about the registry system itself and how it works, there is a recorded webinar available on our website on the California Compliance Offset page. And you can scroll down and find another recorded webinar that covers more of the details of the actual registry platform itself. So I'm going to hand the mic back over to Belinda for question and answers.
So this is Nick. I was going to actually jump in for just a second before Belinda starts the Q&A with one quick clarification. First of all, apologies for the banging. Lauren's having work done on her house, and of course, when we tested it before the webinar, it wasn't very loud. So, so apologies to everyone for that. The one clarification I wanted to mention is just that there's a slide that I skipped titled Specific Examples, and the examples of differences between the early action and compliance offset protocols. And because I skipped that, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that those are just examples that have come up in the recent several months, come up more than once. It's not an exhaustive list, so please don't assume that those are the only differences between the early action and compliance offset protocols. Great. Now I'll turn over to Belinda to start the Q&A.
Thanks, Nick. So just to remind everyone, you can submit your questions through the chat box, or if you'd prefer to ask in person, just click on the hand icon. I think it's at the top of your screen, and I'll call on you. We have a few questions that have come in. Not surprisingly, some of them, they're being directed to Greg, more on the ARB questions. So I'm going to start with a question for Greg. If a project receives early action air resources ARB offset credits but does not transfer to a compliance offset project, will the project be subject to both ARB and OPR verifications for the lifetime of the project? Greg?
So I'd like to say maybe. That's something we'd like to work with the registries on to see if they're willing to accept the ARB verification report. They definitely have to be verified by an ARB accredited verifier meeting the standards of the protocol, of the regulation. And it's up to the registries if they're willing to accept that verification to meet their verification requirements, or if they would require a separate verification.
Great, thanks, Greg. Another question that I'm going to direct to Greg as well. Will there be any additional protocols added to the early action offset program?
As you're probably aware, we're currently going through the process to add rice cultivation and mine methane capture to our list of compliance offset protocols. If those are adopted by the board, we will adopt protocols for early action purposes that are substantially similar to the adopted version. Right now, we haven't finalized our draft, so I'm not able to comment about which ones that are most likely to be eligible.
Greg, would you mind just going back to the previous question? Someone said they couldn't hear your response. Actually, it was the person who asked it. The question about not transferring to a compliance offset project. Just repeat your answer to that.
So if you are issued ARB offset credits, you will be required to satisfy the verification requirements of the ARB regulation. We would be happy to work with the registries to see if that verification will satisfy their requirements for the early action portion of the crediting, but we don't have any control over that, but you definitely will be required to have a verification done by an ARB accredited verifier meeting the requirements of the regulation.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Now here's another one that's come in along the lines of new offset protocols, but this is international. When will we be able to start bringing RED credits from RED Plus projects into the program? Will it be in the early action offset program or in the ARB offset program, in the compliance offset program, sorry?
So international protocols such as RED are not part of the offset programs. They are part of a sectoral-based crediting, which is separate and distinct. With the exception of a linked entity like Quebec, all all sectoral-based crediting would have to be approved by the board and adopted with changes to our regulation. And right now we're following RED, but I don't think we have a time frame on which any adoption of that would occur.
Thanks, Greg. And here's another one. Is an OPR and KITS account required before a project, and I assume it's, well, an early action project can be listed?
To list with the registries, you only need to satisfy their requirements. To transition to ARB, you would have to have a KITS account. Without a KITS account, we have nowhere to place any credits that are issued. So I guess it depends on what before means. Sorry, can't be more specific.
Okay, perhaps that person could clarify, and then I can come back to that question. Okay, this question I think I'll direct to Nick, or actually Lauren might be better. The timelines mentioned for ACR's response to project developers is quite tight, 3 to 5 days. Is this based on current project pipeline, or if there are many projects submitted? So I guess once more projects coming in, will this end up being longer? So basically they want to know if we're going to be able to stick to these timelines going forward into the future, I think.
Yeah, those are those estimated turnaround times are based on our our work in the voluntary market and our current project pipeline. We have been able to stick to them with early action projects and compliance projects listed so far, And on the compliance side, there have been a fair number. Certainly, we can imagine a scenario in which the volume of projects ramps up significantly, and we're trying to watch that very closely so that we can staff up accordingly. So certainly, it's our goal. Obviously, it's our obligation to stick to the timeline specified in the regulation. It's our goal to continue to be able to do each of those steps much faster. And as the volume of projects increases, we'll be staffing up to make sure we can do that.
Thanks, Nick. So here's a clarification on the previous question, Greg. So basically he's asking, does the OPR require an account? Actually, I think I'll direct this to Nick. Does the OPR require an account before the project is submitted? And so he says, I understand KIT's account is necessary to receive RBOX, but does the OPR require the account to be opened?
So I think I understand what the question is. If not, we can unmute Jeff and he can ask it. If an early action, if you're talking about submission of the project, in other words, the early action listing form to the early action offset program, to ACR in this case, yes, they have to have an ACR account because we need to have accepted them as a member, and they would upload that form, the listing form, through our registry system to their project page under ACR. Now, they do not at that point have to have a KITS account. In fact, they can go significantly further in the process before having a KITS account. They have to have a KITS account before they can receive ARB offset credits. But they could go through listing with the early action offset program, monitoring, reporting, verification, being issued early action offset credits, and even the step of submitting information to ARB under the information that's listed in section 95990E2 of the regulation. That all those steps can take place while they're still, while they haven't yet gotten a KITS account. And maybe, at the time they're submitting that information to ARB, they've initiated the process of getting a KITS account, but they're waiting for approval of that. So as I understand, and Greg, please correct me if this is wrong, but even up through and including that step, they don't have to have a KITS account, but certainly before they can be issued RBOX, they do have to have an approved KITS account.
Yes, Nick is correct. Unlike the compliance program, there's no requirement for the listing, only for the crediting. But we encourage you to begin as soon as possible, because the Know Your Customer checks that we have in our protocol or in our regulation can take a while. So the earlier you start, the better.
Great, thanks. So here's a question from a verification body, and this is directed at Nick. If a verification body is accredited by ARB, whether it would require accreditation, would it acquire accreditation by ACR for verification of early action projects?
So the answer is yes. If a verifier is going to serve as the early action verifier, the verifier under the early action offset program rules, that has to be a verifier approved by the early action offset program. So if they, and of course there's a lot of overlap, many of the ARB accredited verifiers are also already accredited ACR verifiers. But if an ARB accredited verifier, has never worked with ACR in the voluntary market, or for whatever reason hasn't been approved by ACR, they need to do it's a quick sort of submitting an application, some staff CVs, various things that we look at to approve them as an ACR verifier, and at that point they can be the early action verifier.
Okay, and here's another question for ARB, for Greg. Is ARB, this is regarding information available on the website, is ARB planning to make changes to the website in order to make more information on offset projects public?
Yeah, yes, we are constantly updating our website, and as more information is required to be public, the website will be updated. Once we start issuing credits, those credits will be publicly available on our, who the credits are issued to will be publicly available on our website, along with links to the compliance offset project. And as we issue early action offset credits, we will include that in the table that we have on our website. So we're constantly updating as fast as we can to include more and more public information on all our projects.
Great, thanks. Hold on a second, one just came in. Here we go. This is another one directed at Greg. When does ARB anticipate the first early action offsets will be approved, I guess issued?
We're really hoping that it's soon. As everyone knows, we have about 50 projects listed on our website. We've received verifications from several of them and are currently working through. This might be a good chance to talk a little bit about that. In order to protect the integrity of our system, we are being very cautious on the first projects coming in, and we are requesting a lot of additional information from verifiers and offset project operators. So if you are one of those projects that are receiving requests for more information, it's not anything targeted specifically at you. We are doing our due diligence to make sure that these offset credits we issue are all legitimate. So the faster and more accurately you comply with our request, the faster I think we'll be able to get these offset credits, or specifically the early action offset credits issued.
Great, thanks Greg. I think that's a burning question for a lot of people out there. Here's another question for you, Greg. What are the practical differences between transition of a project's offset credits versus transitioning the entire project? Are there major differences in the verification review?
There shouldn't be any differences. Maybe I'm missing something, but if you transition the project, you'll begin a new crediting period and have to do a regulatory verification at the end of the first year. When you transition the early action offset credits, whether you transition the project or not, you will have to do a regulatory desk review to get those credits into ARB's program. So whether you transition or not, you're going through that step. If you transition the project, then you'll have additional requirements as any project would in an initial crediting period. So I'm hoping I'm answering that correctly. I don't see any additional benefit or non-benefit of transitioning them.
Okay, so I think the main difference is the desk review.
It has to be done on both, whether you transition or not, so there shouldn't be a difference.
Okay. Let us know, and Nathan, let us know if you need clarification on that question.
Could I jump in for a second on that one? Just to make sure people are clear, because sometimes people use the word transition when they really mean convert. Like if a project has early action offset credits for a particular reporting period or periods, it can convert those into ARB offset credits by going through the desk review, regulatory verification. And that is in the regulation 95990, section F, all the way through section J. It talks about how ARB issues credits, and many of them are one-to-one. Forestry, there's adjustments. Anyway, that's one that's one entire pathway. And then the idea of transitioning to the compliance offset protocol is in 95990K, and it's really separate. That means going, either now if you want to do so, or at the latest by that February 2015 date. The project, if it wants to transition to the compliance protocol, it has to go through a separate process. And projects they do have the option of converting credits and then deciding not to transition to the compliance protocol. So just make sure people are clear that those are really two separate things.
Okay. Hold on, I just look at this one. Okay, this is another question for ARB. At ARB, are projects approved by individuals in stages, or is there some committee that decides jointly on the project? So this might just need a little bit more explanation of the process at ARB.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My computer went to sleep and it says you can't hear me. We have internal processes that we are working the protocols through, and I don't know if it's necessarily appropriate for us to discuss those here. We can talk with legal and see if that's something that's that we should publicly discuss or not, but our staff is reviewing all the projects as they're submitted, and they're going through our written procedures to issue the credits, and those credits will be issued as soon as we can get them approved all the way through.
Great, thanks, Greg. I'm just going to wait a second and see if a couple more questions come in. Here we go. Is 2005, this also I'll direct to Greg, is 2005 the earliest possible start date for an early action project?
For forestry, they can start earlier than that, but for as long as they transition, I believe, but the other projects have to start after that 2005. I might have to get back to you on that. I'll get that question from ACR and confirm that, but I believe I know forestry can start earlier than that. I just don't know what the criteria for that is. I'll have to talk to staff to figure that one out. Sorry.
I think part of the reason for that, Greg, is that the early action protocols for forestry happened earlier, and so there are some credits all the way back to 2001, 2002 or so, and so in my understanding, those start dates are allowed, but they won't be issued credits for any of those. Only start. The regulation is clear that 2005 is the earliest greenhouse gas credits that are issued, even if the project may be allowed to have an earlier start date.
Correct.
Okay, great. I think we've pretty much exhausted the questions for this session, so we will probably end just a little bit early. But I wanted to thank everybody who joined our webinar today, and I want to in particular thank Greg Mayer from ARB for his presentation and for being here to answer the questions. We will get back to everyone with a concrete answer to the other question. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us directly. You can find our contact information on our website. So thank you very much to everybody.